So Nicholas Pegues reporting, also known as the governor of the United States Congress 2014, regarding a young Republican promoting diversity here in Memphis politics. A lot of people from around the world write me and will say, Nicholas, do you think that the system in the United States is broken, or the global system, or the global establishment? I would like to say to them, express to them, no, I don't think the global establishment is broken. I think the Memphis and Shelby County system is broken because of some unseen hate from the Shelby County Unified School Board regarding me as an applicant. I believe that system is broken and it's creating ripple effects across our global establishment. But do I think the global community, the global establishment is broken? No, I do not. I was able to see the President and Mrs. Obama here in Memphis, Tennessee, several times after he came to Booker T. Washington High School. I was still able to see, the President and Mrs. Bush. I'm still able to reach, world leaders from across our wonderful planet. Do I think the Memphis and Shelby County school system is broken? Yes. Do I think the Shelby County government system establishment is broken? To some degree, possibly. But I believe it's being influenced through the Shelby County Unified School Board system. Memphis is a system that is broken, that has been rooted under brokenness. We're a Jim Crow state. We're a state that's rooted under old principles and old values. But I want to express to the Memphis establishment, or whatever they're trying to do, that my family helped establish this city. We weren't, under any loss under Jim Crow. Everything that was established through Victorian Village was through the vision of the Fontaine family. The Fontaine family were freedom fighters. They were the richest family in the world. They did not believe in slavery. They preserved everything for future generations, for my generation to live as free, as they wanted to be. So, this old mindset is coming from somewhere that a lot of people don't know true history of Memphis. The true history, the true origins of Memphis, most of my people are Native American and migrated from, we own this land before anyone possibly came to Memphis, Tennessee. That's the true fact. If you research the Fontaine family, the Fontaines envisioned a freedom for all people here in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis was not supposed to be like this Jim Crow state that everyone has some kind of superpower over another race of people. That was wrong, and wherever that decree came from, or that mindset, those people are illegitimate. The degree of what the Fontaines envisioned was a vision of freedom. It was a vision of freedom of all people, of all races, of all backgrounds. And in fact, Fontaine was the richest man in the world in the 1800s. My church is right behind the Fontaine residence. Roofdraw Fontaine House is the residence of that. My church is right around the corner from the Roofdraw Fontaine House. So whatever these people are saying that this city was built like that, I'm part of the establishment of Memphis. My family has records that go back to the 1860s. I'm not going to tell how far we can actually go back, but we have records that can go back to the 1860s, and we were not oppressed. We were not what they call slaves or indentured servants. We were part of the church. We was part of the community of Victorian Village. So, whatever this mindset is coming from, it's a illegitimate mindset. And I do not like them disrespecting Memphis. I do not like them disrespecting my family, and I do not like them disrespecting the origins of how this city was built. If they have a problem with history or the way things have, with lying against this community, then leave the city of Memphis, because, I'm frankly getting tired of this political hate against me. I'm getting tired of the political hate against my family, and wherever it's coming from, whatever is the root cause of it, I'm going to use the power of the United States government, from the White House, from the President and Mrs. Obama, who have extended me this diverse letter. As you can see, this is the second month that I have not opened this. I'm going to use the powers upon this earth to, get to the root of all this political hate, because it makes no sense. If you research the history and you become educated about how Memphis was established, then we can live a better life here in the 21st century. And that's the problem. They're not educated. They oppress themselves in their own. They have a Jim Crow slave mindset. And, if they research something, they really went back to the history of what Memphis was, they will know this. But they placed themselves in a slave mindset. But at any rate, a happy Sunday to all of my Facebook friends and fans from around the world. May God save the Queen. And of course, anyone can research my history as a descendant of Victorian Village, Collins Chapel Historic District. Thank you. Nicholas Pegues reporting. First, I'm a monarchist. Now I'm a capitalist. Then I'm a young Republican. CNN icon of Memphis, also known as the governor for Tennessee governor. Nicholas Pegues, also known as the governor for the United States Congress, 2014. Thank you. Let's call it a tea party. Where's Sarah Palin? Let's create something. Princess Beatrix, this is your elected American boyfriend. Thank you, everyone. Nicholas Pegues reporting here in Memphis, Tennessee, a Victorian Village, here in the city of Memphis, where I just attended church today. First African American church established here in Victorian Village. And here is part of my documentary, for CNN Our Report. Here are some of the historic homes of Victorian Village here in Memphis, Tennessee. Very interesting. Nicholas Pegues reporting. Promoting and educating the international community about Memphis and its historic history. And here's the house that I'm going to tour today. The CNN Our Reporter, called the Woodruff Fontaine House and Museum. Let's go in and tour it. Nicholas Pegues reporting. Here at Victorian Village. Let's forget, CNN Our Reporter Memphis.
Portrait in the front hall of Daisy Mallory, who was the last resident. And she had the foresight to actually leave the house complete with its contents. And it's now part of the Memphis museum systems. And it's such a wonderful thing to go through and see furniture that was bought at the World's Fair and that was purchased particularly to go in a certain place in the house. It's not things that have been put back in, but you really get the sense of how people lived and what the bay and the parlor was like and where the musicians might have stood while they played for dinner parties. And that's very rare. I can only think of a few other houses in the United States that are preserved in that condition.
Our family moved here in the mid-1800s, and we're in the cotton warehousing business and banking business and general business community. And I think their neighbors along this street were also in similar businesses, primarily agricultural focused. We call my grandmother's house Adam Street. We always referred to it as we're going to go to Adam Street. Adam Street as a structure was just your grandmother's house. She was the reason we went to visit, and she set the rules and we followed them.
If these other houses looked as grand as this one, then Memphis had some really, really prosperous, amazingly wealthy people. You know, you've seen the pictures of Napoleon Hill's house, you know, and you know that okay, this man had some money in late 19th century Memphis, so his house would have had to have been as fabulous as this one. So, and then having gone into the Hunt Phelan house before, you know, they took all the stuff out and everything and remodel, and it's a bed and breakfast now. That was a grand house. It's fantastic, beautiful house.
If you were a very wealthy family, you might have a drawing room, and this was a room that was used for entertaining and really to impress people. It was usually a very large room, and you might use it also for dances and things like that. Another thing that went on in the house that was very different from the way we live is there was separation. This house, if you go along to the side, the Woodruff Fontaine house, the servants' wing is lower than the rest of the house. You have to actually step up 2 or 3 steps to get into the rest of the house. And the back wing has porches all along the back. Their porches are separate from the other porches on the house, which were for the Woodruffs and the Fontaine, not for the servants. There definitely is a back stair and houses were zoned for servants as well as for the people in the house. And they were to come and really take care of your needs, but not spy on you all the time, which was a really big deal. Delivery men, callers coming in all the time, no telephones, little notes being delivered, and also, of course, having to deal with the daily activity of children and all their bumps and bruises and things like that. Nothing was simple. Everything was much harder. Also, don't forget, you can't just go and jump in the car. Oops. There has to be horses, there has to be a stable, and there has to be those people that take care of it too.
They had horses, and the old Sanborn insurance maps show that behind the Lee House, where we have a parking lot now, sheds ran down that slope for probably a cow or two and the horses. And of course, there were two stables here.
Most houses in the 19th century would have had a privy, an outhouse in the backyard. If you were an upper class individual, you might have a toilet that had a copper pan that was surrounding it, and we didn't have oval toilets at that time, and there might be overflow into the pan. It's such a change from today when our bathrooms have gotten so large and luxurious. Bathrooms were stinky, nasty places that people didn't like to clean. So they were as small as possible. But houses would have lavatories, so you would have a place to go in and wash. Also, there were wash stands in houses too, the typical pitcher and the bowl that we see, very much used into the late 19th century.
Well, it's funny because many times we think about the activity alone just to run this house, just to get the fires cleaned out and started, to get the food started, to get there had to be a full staff of people to keep the dust off of this exquisite furniture and the paintings that were here. My personal favorite is the fact that there's a chamber pot in every room in this house on the upper floors, and that alone was something that had to be taken care of.
Most people don't know that there was a very strict calling etiquette, and that certain times of the week ladies would go and call on other ladies. There would be certain days that the lady of the house would have to accept callers. And that person would come in, they would leave their calling card. It would go on a tray and go upstairs. They would be accepted or they would be rejected.
Lacking television, lacking radio, things that they knew nothing about and could not imagine, a great deal of social life involved interaction with people. With women, it could involve simply meeting mutually for sewing parties or to talk or to prepare things for charitable causes. Men, often it would involve business discussions, but that could be involved over card games. Of course, drinking was common throughout in Memphis.
Memphis has always been a town known for its music. Scores of immigrants from European countries, as well as other cities in the United States, brought along their art and cultural influences, creating the rich melting pot that has been at the core of the Memphis music story.
The technology of the second half of the 19th century certainly makes some amazing things happen. And particularly in the area of the arts, you move from what would have previously been something of an elite ability to hear live music. There are only certain places that could afford to have, say, an organ or to have a piano. You more typically had mandolin. You had mandolin societies all over the place because that's an instrument that's easily portable, it's a little cheaper and so on. So it's amazing how many mandolin clubs that you have. But with technology, you make a piano and you make the parts of a piano much more, let's call it widgetized. You can make many of those in mass production. So what would have been an expensive instrument, by the 1870s, a piano costs $200. You can own a piano for $200. And you do see scores of people, hundreds of people, being able to have their own parlor piano. Or even cheaper, you can mass produce the parts that make a little pump organ. You can have those instruments available for $80. So if you can't afford a piano, you can afford a little pump organ. And that made live music possible, not as a destination, but something I can have in my own home. Therefore, the technology then becomes enabling. What do you have to have? Well, you have to have someone to play the piano or play the organ. You have to have some renewable source of tunes and songs. And so that sets up this whole pyramid of retail that provides you a piano or an organ, sheet music. You need some new tunes next week. We heard that one. We want a new one. We can't download it. We have to go and buy it at a sheet music store, and someone has to learn to play it. And then, of course, we have to have teachers, people that can teach the household person or persons how to indeed play that instrument. We have several retail stores that are blossoming in the late 19th century in Memphis. One of the biggest would be Emil Witzman and Company, and we have the ledger in the Memphis Public Library of all the pianos that were sold from 1873 to the turn of the century. So we actually know the households, thanks to the good archival work of our friends here. We have the actual households and churches and schools where those instruments were sold. They were sold by the hundreds. They were in homes over and over again. In Memphis, northern Mississippi, Arkansas, those pianos were being distributed all over the area. The presence of bands and civic bands and bands based upon people's ethnicity, let's say a group of Swiss or a group of Italian or a group of Germans, these were direct transfers from cultural desires and preferences that they brought from their mother country. Brass instruments indeed were big items in Germany and Germanic countries, and so it's no surprise that we see these German bands being popular, and Memphis had theirs early on. We didn't have modern forms of entertainment. We did not have the phonograph. I mean, the phonograph comes along later, radio comes along later, and there's a great social shift there with what happens in the parlor. But before you have that, the only way you can have live music, the way you can enjoy music, only one way is to create it yourself. You have to home make it.
I've just always been fascinated by antiquity, and I saw all these buildings being torn down in this area. The urban renewal had moved into this area, and a lot of older parts of Memphis, like over on Vance, but particularly this part, and they just were destroying so much. And I thought it was such a shame that Memphis was not saving any of its old buildings, not a one was. So that's why I got so fired up about it. I was seeing these things being demolished right under my nose, all on Jefferson and Adams and Washington. And I thought, this is just criminal to all these big, torn down in the name of progress, which wasn't progress at all.
Eldridge toughed it out through thin and thinner. When the city widened Jefferson, they took down his grandfather's house, I think it was, Luke.
They were going to tear the whole house down. I persuaded them to just take that was a huge house, take what they needed off the front. If they needed to take some of the facade off the front and leave the rest, they wanted to restore it. They said to widen the street, they would have to take something like 5 feet off the facade of the house, the front facade, which was removing all the most interesting parts, almost all of the Italianate work that my great aunt had been putting on there. But so they did remove that, and I had plans to restore it basically as it had been. But fate came along and changed my plans. One whole side of the house collapsed one night. I think it had been so weakened by the demolition of removing the facade across the front that it weakened the whole house, and one whole wall collapsed on the west side.
And he was not to be deterred. He saved all the bricks, sat out there in the broiling sun and knocked all of the cement off of the bricks and saved them, and then built that beautiful wall.
And a lot of interesting dignitaries came to that house, you know. When Teddy Roosevelt came to Memphis, he was an Italian that was after my grandfather had been his Secretary of War, and he came to Memphis. And because he was entertained there, people did such bizarre things, I think. My great-grandmother had all the silverware and the silver goblets and everything that they were going to use for the great dinner party. All of that was gold-plated for the party.
When I first went to visit him, he was living in the carriage house with plastic covering all the carriage doors. And he was living in there year-round. Gradually, he did that building in beautiful style, and then decided, I don't know whether he decided he had put enough money in there, but he certainly didn't want this house around here on Adams to go belly up, so to speak. And so he came around here and got this house. He has stayed with this through all of these years, and we dubbed him the mayor of Adams Avenue a long time ago.
Well, I think that, you know, he was a candle in the darkness. You know, everybody was leaving rather than coming in. And it's taken many years even for his idea of what the neighborhood would be like to start coming about. And he was actually the initial founder of our group, Victorian Village, Inc., a community development corporation that he started in the early 70s with quite a few members of society that were interested in saving the neighborhood. So now we've renewed that group, and our plan is to continue the revitalization of the area.
Much change has come to Memphis, and the tendency has been to demolish everything from the past, put up what is most recent, until it in turn gets removed also. So when you go back past the Victorian era, only a handful of structures really are left in this great city of over 600,000 people. But in the Victorian era, this is the finest collection of architecture and artifacts of a way of life that is now gone, but still is a part of the life of the city visible today.
I come down this street every opportunity I get, and I look at this, and I just feel connected to my home.
I think the urge to save these homes and the history they contain and what they can teach a younger generation once they get old enough to pay attention is very important. And you can't let it fall down and think you can talk about it later.
We're either doomed to repeat it or we can learn from it. And so the reason we want to preserve these things is we certainly want to learn from it. We've got great things to learn from our unique history.
I think it's one of the few places in Memphis where you can actually see how people lived in the late 19th century and turn of the century Memphis that, you know, I hate to say it, but Memphis is not really famous for maintaining historic locations. But here's this little place that you can bring people and say, this is what Memphis was like, late 19th, turn of the century.
Well, Collins Chapel is a part of Victorian Village by geography. It is a part of Victorian Village by belief in the community, by action, words, and deeds. We in this church have joined the Victorian Village family, and we support the neighborhood, the community, and we wish to play a role in the development of the neighborhood.
Houses get patination, and they go through history and time, and all the families that have gone through them and their stories. very much are a part of the past that we need to be connected with.
I would love to see this become a village again. I would love to see Adams Avenue be blocked off as a walking path. I would love to see some new construction that would complement these older homes, become part of this village. I would love to see some adaptive reuse of the buildings that are taking hold here.
The concept of our development corporation is to bring a lot of residential back downtown, because we think that in order to preserve these houses, they need to become the centerpiece, they need to become the jewel